Hello, everybody. My name is Gene Monterastelli, the editor of tappingqa.com, and I am joined today by one of my dear, dear friends and someone who I love to have conversations with. Jondi, how are you doing today, Jondi?
I'm great. Always happy to see you.
Awesome. So this is kind of fun for me. We had a little pre-conversation setting up what's going on, but you don't know what we're about to talk about, other than the fact we're going to talk about it in big pictures. And so just to give you all some context, over the course of November and December, I did a bunch of master classes with a lot of really amazing transformational folks that are just on the cutting edge and doing some really amazing stuff. And Johnny was one of those people. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But one of the things that I realized as I was going through all of these conversations, even though no one knew what anybody else was talking about, it was as if 16 jigsaw puzzles showed up and all of these ideas just neatly dovetailed together. And you know what it's like when you're at a conference and you're giving the seventh talk and you get to reference the people earlier in the day? It's like that
Yes.
happened, but no one else had heard what was going on. And so I thought because that was the experience, we could pull out some thoughts out of this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share those 10 thoughts. I'm going to share them with Jondi, and Jondi and I, we're just going to have a conversation. I want you to respond to them. And as you know, and as you are wont to do, you're allowed to disagree with me and tell me what you think instead. And that's one of the reasons why I love you and love having these conversations with you is you are willing to speak your truth where you're coming from. And this is just an opportunity for all of us to learn from some really amazing folks. So are you ready, Jondi, for me to spring things on you?
I am so ready. This is what we call trust.
Excellent. Awesome. Okay. So, let's go. Number one, not all transformation is equal, and that is okay. So, when you hear something like that, what is the thing that springs to your mind and as you think about the transformational process?
Well, in a cheeky response, I'd say get over yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because our egocentric, our own ideas about what that means is
Mm-hmm.
part of what can hold us back from evolving and growing as an agent of change. So
Yeah.
recognizing that that transformation is so personal to them is the thing.
Yeah. And this actually, like this idea, as we look at this, comes from a lot of the conversations you and I have had over the years about the idea of the difference between doing emotional first aid work and doing deeper work where we're looking at things in different ways. And so, not only, like you said, is our transformational experience unique, and it's so easy to have paranoia and think that, oh, they did this and I did that, and boy, I'm not as good as this, and boy, it's like this is transformation that's good for everybody, not for me, which is such an awesome thing for us to recognize, but also to like have different sets of expectations every single time we sit down to do something, because the goal of each and every time we tap is really, really different. I think one of the favorite things that you've said to me is this idea is when we were having a different conversation about emotional first aid, you're like, and this isn't even tapping, even
Yeah.
though you're tapping in that moment, but this idea that it's not about that. It's about finding our way back to ground and thinking about things in a slightly different way.
I do love that. And I want to riff on that for a moment and just say my expectation my, my expectation is for better. It's a pretty
Yes.
broad, open-ended,
Yes.
elastic concept. And I don't get to say what better is. And I love
Yeah.
that too. Takes a lot of pressure off, doesn't it?
Oh, and that's the other thing is like sud scales and SU scales are really useful in trying to get those places. And my question for my clients all the time is, okay, what's the next better emotion you could feel right now? Whatever you
Mm.
define that as, and it's not ecstatic and it's not overwhelmed and it's not pain free, but it's like, great, what's the next better? And then after we do
Yes.
that, do we still have some more space and more capacity to do some more work right now? Or are we done for the day because that's as far as we can go? And if we can go a little farther, great, what's better? And I think it takes so much pressure off the transformational process. And I think there is something really good that has been happening in the transformational space and the tapping spaces. We hear so many fewer stories about 1 minute miracles and one session miracles, because I
Yeah.
think those sorts of things undermine our credibility, but also create really unreasonable expectations. Um, I would, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I teach people in my classes this idea of patient pacing, which
Hmm.
doesn't mean so much for yourself. I'm hoping you're already going to be patient with them, but that expectation goes hand in hand with patient pacing for the change they can absorb at the rate
Yeah.
they can absorb it.
Yeah. I mean, it's the idea that just because running a mile is good, running 100 is not 100 times better. Um, I one time was in a circumstance. I was in Peru, doing some work with a buddy of mine who works in a very, very, very poor parish, and we were having dinner one night. Jack's like, "We got to go talk to Calvin right now." And Calvin was in a circumstance where, when he was 9, his father had dropped him off at the prison as the place that he went to live. And you can imagine he had a little trauma in his life. We did 90 seconds of tapping, and then he went and slept for 14 hours. Like, literally, the capacity of transformation he had in that moment, because there was so much there, was as far as he could physically go. And that's the most extreme example I've ever encountered. But it's so good for us to recognize, like, it's process. It's not just today, and being okay with different degrees of what the outcome is as we're navigating this stuff.
I completely love that. And
Awesome.
it goes really hand in hand with that concept of knowing they don't actually know what they need, and neither do
Yeah.
you. And
Yeah.
so we're finding this out together. And that's why I love that Ram Dass quote so much. We're all just walking each other home.
Yeah. One of the words that came up a lot in these conversations, and I think you used the word as well, was curiosity.
Oh,
And us
yes.
showing up as helpers, or when we're even doing work for ourselves, is just having this real sense of curiosity about what is going on. And curiosity, like, it is almost impossible to hold expectations and curiosity simultaneously.
Same.
Like, we have to let go of one in order to have the other. And it's such a healthier place for us to navigate the transformational process.
Absolutely. And I have to admit, I harness the word compassionate to the front of it, because
Ah, that's
compassionate
awesome.
curiosity keeps them in what I think is the kinder space,
Yeah, that's
right?
awesome.
I'm not
Yeah.
just curious.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like framing that in that really specific way. Awesome. Thought number 2 that arrived. If you don't know what the issue is about, it's probably about fear.
I think that's wonderful. It's so succinct. I went to what I called psych school a long time ago when I was very young, and then I ran away screaming. I wasn't in a safe place.
Yeah.
And I knew that, but I didn't know that I knew that. I just knew I had to run away.
Yeah.
And it took 20 years to circle back around to a lot of the
Hmm.
things that I had been studying. And so in that, one of the first things you learn is about the Maslow. And the Maslow bottom line is safety, right?
Yeah.
Safety, survival. And so that's come back to me again and again. It wasn't a very compelling, exciting sort of paradigm that he built, but it seems like it's now been capped with another evolutionary thinker, Stephen Porges, which is because it's about safety, probably,
Yeah.
because that's the first foundation that you can build anything on. And if you don't have that, ain't nothing really going down.
Yeah. And the one of the quotes that Brad Yates uses all the time is, it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the scaredest. And it's like the dumb old joke where two people are out camping and a bear shows up, and one of the guys starts putting on tennis shoes, and the other guy's like, "You're not going to outrun the bear," and he's like, "I don't have to, I just have to outrun you."
And run you.
Whoever 7,000 years ago, our ancestor that heard fear first got the jump
Yeah.
start, and they were the one that procreated. And, like, fear's great. Like, fear is the reason why we're alive. And when it shows up in that disproportionate, misinformed sense, when I'm afraid to put myself out there, when I'm afraid to have a hard conversation, like, anytime I'm not doing something, the first question I always ask, or I'm working with clients, is, okay, great. Tune into that sensation in your body. What does it think is going to go wrong? Because it's that primary driver, because fear always wins. Like, I can be having
Absolutely.
sophisticated thoughts, and the moment fear comes in, it's the alarm that is going off that overrides everything.
I think I'd even put it on the end of that sentence. Fear always wins.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed in taking the Porges material is how often what that behavior is, or that look is that you're
Hmm.
seeing, is a version of flight
Yeah.
because of fear, right? And seeing it that way is so much more, it's so much kinder, and it's so much more explicative of all the things that are going on with them that haven't actually reached this part.
Right.
That's why they don't know, right? And so
Yeah.
just realizing that your phrase is great. Fear always wins.
And so this kind of dovetails off of it. And the third idea is, at the core, we are herd animals.
Hmm. Yes. I my corollary to that is man is the mammal that lives in herds too,
Hmm.
right? And that didn't come out quite right, but I say it in class all the time. And this is actually a reason that we've talked about before, that I conceived uh, the spring energy event as something I wanted to keep asking you to
Yep.
help me with all along, because it speaks to the isolation of the I don't know, and I don't want anyone to know I don't know, and what if I'm doing it wrong, and all these sorts of things that, you're right, it dovetails right off the last one. Those are fear thoughts. And so in our herd, where we can derive that safety and support and feeling of, I think it's the connectedness,
Yeah.
that's where we get our juice and our safety.
And the place that this came up in a lot of these conversations is this idea of, 7,000 years ago, if we were pushed outside of the herd, we died. And so there becomes this kind of flip side to it. The side you're talking about is this gentle kinding, connecting, this thing that we need. Like I've always known I'm a physically affectionate person, and what's going on in the world right now has been very difficult because I don't, like, I live alone and my Roomba isn't the most cuddly thing in the world. And so like having that sense of connection is important. And then the other side of it is, if we think we are doing something that is going against the grain of the cultural norm, that very primitive step fires off and says, you're going to get pushed outside the herd and you're going to die. And we need the herd to survive. And so oftentimes when we're struggling to stay connected, but step into who we authentically are, it almost feels as if those things show up in conflict with each other, because there's a part of me that believes if I'm my authentic self, then I will not belong and I am going to lose that thing that is essential, not nice, but essential for my survival.
I completely agree. And I think that's why there's so many metaphors and constructs for that. For being seen or being heard for who you are is
Yeah.
about the tallest dandelion gets cut off first, right? It is about standing out when you don't want to. There is safety and camouflage in herd. I grew up with some religious cultures that would out or shun, and
Yeah.
so it was really clear to me that that fear-based training, I would like to call it, was the central thing in many of them's lives, because it was the essential survival. I am part of this group until I'm not, and so I have to be here, because that is, well, death is a little dramatic, but
Yeah.
emotionally, I think that was true.
Yeah. And what's interesting inside of that is how oftentimes cultural norms are created as a way of keeping us safe that then become orthodoxy in a way where it is completely fear-based, that if I step outside this, is it's dangerous. So the norm gets created based on fear, and then those of us that need to, because of who we are, step against it, are afraid to step against it. So a circumstance is created by fear that then creates fear in us as we try and contrast against that particular thing. And it just, we want to belong, we want to be connected, it's natural, it's like who we are in our fiber. And so it's really difficult when we start bumping into the things that make it hard for us to do that. And so I think it's useful for us when we're doing work with ourselves and others to ask the questions like, okay, if I do this, who do I feel like is going to judge or push that away? And just being able to name that to see if that is something that is useful and valuable, because sometimes people's feedback is useful and valuable, and sometimes it is unuseful and it is unvaluable.
I I agree. And I think that the word that comes to me is, it's the difference between us and them.
Yeah. Yeah. And being able to navigate all of that. Awesome. Number 4, thoughts precede emotions, emotions precede actions.
Well, if I understand all this correctly, that mind-body connection that we
Mm-hmm.
are a part of in our work, our thoughts are driving our body's reaction because they are inextricably linked.
Mm-hmm.
So for every thought, there is a reaction. It's almost like being in science class for that to happen. And once we understand that, I think we get back into Mike Dooley territory, right? Thoughts are
Mm-hmm.
things, so think the good ones. I love that because he just sums it up in a smiley way. But those emotions, which are in my book, this is energy or energetic information in motion. Those emotions like anger are there to tell you to do something,
Yeah.
right? And so they work hand in glove until you understand that those 70,000 thoughts or so that you have a day
Mm-hmm.
may not all be true. And
Yeah.
so what we're actually doing in this work is teaching each other how we're made, how we act naturally and organically, and what to do about that.
Yeah. And for me, like that's exactly what I read into this as well. And I think it becomes really useful for us where, like, again, we go back to that thought. There's different ways that we approach the tapping idea. Sometimes I use tapping to regulate the emotion, and sometimes I'm using tapping to interrogate and transform that thought to see if the thought is actually true, and using tapping in a way where we get the opportunity to go in and rewrite, through memory consolidation, these beliefs that are there, which then impact the emotions that then show up after that particular thought. And so it gives us a window into the fact that we can use tapping at both of these places. But I think it's super valuable for us to understand that these are two different doorways that we can walk through. And sometimes we don't even know which one we're walking through, in that sense of curiosity as we step into this. But it gives us two lenses to look at. Okay, great. This is what is going on. This is my response, or these are the actions I'm taking, or this is what I'm feeling when I experience this. It gives me multiple entry points and asking questions when I'm doing the transformation for myself.
I agree with that. Absolutely. And in my classes, I teach we have 3 doors. We have the
Mm-hmm.
thoughts door, the emotions door, and the body door, the body
Yeah.
sensations door. And I tell them, one of them is always going to be available to you, and
Yeah.
walk through any door, and it's always the same hallway. So it doesn't
Yes.
matter. Right?
Yes. Yes.
It's
All
just which is
transformation.
available to you.
Yep. The old Milton Erickson line, all transformation starts by stating with what is. And I think that oftentimes we get, like, it's great in tapping training where we say be as specific as possible because you're going to have better results as you're specific as possible. And people misread that to say, I need to be specific. And sometimes as specific as possible is there is a pit in the bottom of my stomach, and that is all that I know. And so that's that door you're walking through, but that is as specific as possible. And as I do this specific as possible, hopefully I'm going to start to have some relief, which is now stepping through that doorway into that hallway where I now have more details. I now have more context. I have this pit in my stomach because I'm afraid. I'm afraid because I'm worried about. I'm worried about because when I was 6, this happened. And it slowly unfolds in front of itself, but just as specific as possible as any of those 3 doors, just fumbling for where that sense is.
I love that. And I love, as you've described it, it's more like as specific as possible in the moment. And
Yep.
then there is the unfolding, because it
Yes.
will get more so as they feel safe enough to take a look at it and stay with that discomfort.
Yeah.
Yet another minute and another nano and another minute.
I often think about it like looking into the backyard on a misty morning. And as the sun comes up and the mist slowly burns away, initially it's just mist. And then there's a sense of a tree, and then maybe a shed that I can now see a door that has a lock. And oh, the hinges are rusty. And oh, look, there's a bird feeder. And just over the course of 20 minutes as it warms up, it's almost like the painting is coming into focus as it clears away. And with each tap, I'm just a little mist is going away, and I have the next nanosecond where I get a little more information. The next nanosecond, I get a little more information. And I think it's a healthier approach. And it also like takes the pressure off. Because so often it's like, oh, this thing isn't working. I'm not there because we have this desire to be there. It's not like I'm doing it wrong because I want it quickly. I'm human and I want to be out of discomfort. I want that as quickly as possible. But it eases that a little bit, that allows us to do the transformation in a slightly different way.
And I really like the calm nature of what you've described as a way to let people know how that unfolds. That
Mm-hmm.
pre-frame is kind and friendly and very
Yeah.
visual, easy to understand. I like that.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why after a round of tapping, I always ask my clients, what did you notice? Because it's not about success. It's not about transformation. It's not about anything else. It's just like, great. Tell me your experience. What part of that experience was notable? And even if it's just like, yeah, I don't really notice anything different. Awesome. That's a really useful piece of information. And like clients want to perform. Like they want to do good for us, which is the silliest thing in the world, but we all want people to like us. Like, I don't
Yeah.
care if you perform for me. I just want what's best for you. And by softening it in that particular way, you're right. Whatever you noticed is right. Therefore, we get to then
That's right.
take the next step in a gentle way without feeling like we're doing it good or bad. It's just feedback, and it makes it easier and gentler to step into that.
I love that. I really do. It's gentler and it's more available to them. I mean, this is one of the big takeaways from, let's call it psychology school, to tapping, is whatever they notice is right. There's no need for you to reframe that.
Yeah.
That's their subjective truth. And your accepting it is building the kind of rapport that leads to trust, that leads to that safe enough to stay in that moment.
Now, I like to, the way I oftentimes describe it is my job is to be the color of water, you know,
I love that.
and I show up. So, number 5, and we've talked about this a little bit. Here we go. Many of our issues were once useful survival tools.
Mhm.
I think the way Mary Ayres said it, and I think it's from Be Free, Fast, Be Set Free Fast, NIMS's work,
So
whatever the acronym is that the problem, the solution is now the problem.
yes, I love that phrase. I think it was Larry Nims. I use it a lot. The paraphrase of that is good strategy, wrong time.
Yeah.
Where does this belong? From somewhere else where it may have been helpful. And I don't even know if it was then, but what if that
Right.
didn't matter?
Yeah.
What if this is just a good tool in the wrong place?
Yeah. I like using the word useful. Like,
Oh,
this is
useful is good.
this is an unuseful tool, and I'm just going to put it down. The other thing that and this has come up recently with my clients as we've been doing this sort of work, is we get to the point where we recognize our younger self was using a tool as a survival mechanism. And as an adult, we go, okay, that is a really unuseful tool where we are today. And I've actually added this layer of where we do a round of, and sometimes it's directly in inner child work, and sometimes it's just around a tapping, where we celebrate the creative, crafty, ingenuitive 6-year-old who solved a problem that they never should have been able to like they never should have had to solve that problem. And when we look back, we go, oh, that wasn't a very good tool. But going, oh my gosh, this completely unformed, untrained 6-year-old version of me all by themselves found this way to get through that. And like, I'm having this conversation today because of that little superhero all of those years ago found a solution that was impossible to an impossible problem. And in doing that and doing that little round of celebration, it makes it so much easier to let go of the tool, because then we're able to see it. It's not a value judgment. Yeah, go ahead.
And also to let go of the anger and judgment that many people have about either that child of them, that time in their life, or that they still do that thing. There's a lot of unresolved anger that I find. And
Yeah.
one of the ways to do it is exactly what you said. And I might sneak up on it. I might just sort of That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Wow. They thought of that as a way to enter that conversation with them, because typically if they're angry, they're not thinking of it that way at all.
Right.
And once they can see that brilliance, we can both appreciate it from this place and say, wow, what she made, how can we build on that in a way that honors what's going on now
Hmm.
in a more appropriate way, more useful way? Um, I do love those kinds of transformations, because you're essentially giving a person not giving a person back their past, their inner
Yeah.
child, their as Ann Adams used to always tell me, respecting what the child is in fact able to do. That's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah. Like people are always amazed at, the way that I'm able to get along with little kids. And I'm like, well, I just treat them like people. Like it's not that difficult. Like they're just people. That's all. I was certainly a know-it-all child at 7 and thought I understood how the world worked. And I thought how all of my parents' friends were actually my friends. They weren't actually my parents'
Exactly.
friends who were tolerating me. Like, no, that's my friend George. No, I don't know. He's my friend.
Yeah.
And being able to approach like our inner child as like people, like actual people who have agency and are doing the best they can where they are, and it just transforms the ability for us to look at that in a really different way.
It does. I love that.
Excellent. Number 6, we've talked about. Oh, number 6, transformation is easier when you encounter your issue with a sense of curiosity. We've talked about this a number of times already. Yeah, my Will Horton, who I did my NLP training with, he runs the National Federation of NLP. Whenever a client gives him a piece of information, his response is fascinating.
Uh,
And there's just not a sense of judgment with that particular thing. It's like, that's the thing that we got. Okay, let's see what's going on. And like it's practically impossible to say the word fascinating in a judgmental way. That's fascinating. Like it just like we just can't do that. And so by framing it in that particular way, it gives us the opportunity with a lot of the things that we've been talking about so far, and to approach that in a gentle way as we do all of that. Number
I do
7.
think it takes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think this is a tossable, but I think it takes the onus off, as we used to say. If we're curious, it takes the weight off.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, because again, it's not like there's not a value judgment to this thing. Is it good or bad? It's like, I wonder what this thing is. What's under the rock? Let's poke it with a stick. Let's see what happens here. That's okay. Yeah. Number 7, to act in a new way requires us to see ourselves, the world, or both in different ways. It requires an identity change.
That's a very packed sentence there.
It is. So unpack it. So as you hear
got
that,
a lot
you
in
have
it.
to agree with it. Like what do you hear? What do you think about when you have a sentence like that, an idea like that?
Well, when I pull that apart, I say, to act in a different way means that I see things in a different way. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I wouldn't change, right?
Yeah.
This is fine. Oh, wait. And then I can start looking at things differently. You can
Hmm.
call it perspective, but I rather the other way. Just look at things differently. Or I often say in a less heady way, I go, if I just turn that upside down, what would that look like? And
Hmm.
that is at once combining the curiosity, but also trying to see it differently, because once I do, my relation to it has to
Hmm.
probably change also. And I think that's what this sentence means to me.
Yeah.
Love that.
One of the things that I see that shows up with something like this is oftentimes when we identify ourselves or identify something, we are identifying its abilities and capabilities and its limitations. I am not the type of person who is a successful business owner. I am not the type of person who has a long-term lasting romantic relationship. And if I see myself in that way, then my subconscious is going to prevent me from taking actions in a direction that it doesn't see as fruitful. Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the beauties of that metaphor of the tabletop. If I see myself this way, everything that happens to me is going to be shoved under that same table, if,
Right.
whether that fits or not. So, like we were talking about a few minutes ago with that child, if I see that child as an idiot who believed everything they were told, as opposed to the brilliance of that child realizing if they just pretended they understood that or they
Yep.
believed that, they'd go along to get along. And that is an entirely different identity that you now see about that child.
Yeah. Awesome. Excellent. So we have three more of these, but before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about where these conversations came from. So, like I said, Jondi was one of these great people. Over the course of 6 weeks, I just put together 16 really amazing conversations and 16 really amazing master classes from some of my favorite people in the world who were lucky enough that I was lucky enough that they gave me some of their time. And the master classes are really useful because as you see, as we're talking about these ideas, we're seeing how that we can approach complicated issues in a much simpler way, finding those doorways to step through them, to be able to uncover those root causes and how to start tapping. I am sure you are in a circumstance, Jondi, like I am, where I have clients all the time saying, okay, I just didn't know what to do. Like they even sat down to try and do that thing and do the work on their own and had the intention and don't have the guidance of someone that, the space when we're working with clients, we're co-creating a space that creates some safety for them. And so sometimes it's really easy for us to feel lost on our own. And so this is just an opportunity to take some folks that really have a lot of experience and step into it a way that is healthy and natural. The program is put together in 4 really simple areas. There are 4 master classes on health. There are 4 on relationships. There's 4 on a relationship to money and 4 on taking action. And I love the way that, like I said, these conversations mirror each other so much that oftentimes we don't want transformation. We're going to talk about this in just a moment for the sake of transformation. It's what we do and what we become because of that. It's not just enough for me to sit in my room and transform. That's lovely, but we get to show up in the world in different ways. And so the classes are structured to allow you to do that. There is over 20 hours of absolutely stunning training, 16 tap alongs. So for each of the master classes, after you've done the master class, there's an 8 to 10 minute tapping experience that you can go back to and tap along to and listen to again and again and again to make it easier for you to embody what is going on. Everybody teaches really, really cool tools. As I was recording this, I think I sent you a text message about this, Jondi. I had sent your conversation to my mother. And she just sent me this glowing, gushing back about how much she loved the conversation that was so helpful in some relationship stuff that was really good and useful for her. So it's not just ideas, it's things that we can use. And then I put together this fun little tapping journal. It's great that we have tools, and I have been guilty of doing this where I have purchased courses, digital products, and then they live on my hard drive and I never do anything about them. Back in July, I did a month-long class where there was between 30 and 90 minutes of video every single day. And at the end of the 30 days, you no longer had access to it. So I had to do it. And so I created a little tracking system to make sure I used all of the resources. And so I've created that for this product as well, so that once you download it, you now have an opportunity to print this little thing out and you can give yourself gold stars. That's the way I do it. I literally make little grids, just like I treat myself like I'm 6 years old. The grid is already made. You'll have to get your own gold stars, but it's a really easy way for you to make sure that you stay on track with all of this stuff. You can find out all of the amazing information about this really, really cool thing. Jondi was one of the first 5 interviews that I did. Carol Look was the 5th interview that I did. And at the end of the interview, I was reflecting on these puzzle pieces and how they were fitting together. And I was a little embarrassed to say that I started crying in front of Carol Look while we were on a Zoom call, just because I was so moved by the stuff that is in here. Go check out who is on there. You will recognize many of the names. Every single person on the list that I talked to, I've interviewed in the past. Everybody showed up with their best stuff. Jondi is no exception to that. She's been on my podcast multiple times. It is the best interview her and I have ever had about a conversation and a topic. So I would really encourage you to check it out. All of the details are there. We'll share this again in a few minutes. So now that the commercial interruption is over, let's continue on talking about transformation.
Well, just 1 minute. I just want to put this in, and if you wish to move it somewhere else, that's fine. I really wanted to say personally that everybody knows that I'm not a big marketer. I'm not a big affiliate person. I don't often join those things. But because of the quality and because of the trust I have in you and because of the sheer, I want to say the quality and the breadth and depth of what you have assembled for them, it really feels so rich. And it, of course, it's like Q&A, tapping Q&A, in that it's so rich, but it's a fully thought out and realized package. I do believe that it's the best I've ever seen. And so, of course, I wanted to be a part of it. And of course, I wanted to tell my peeps about it. Thank you so much.
You bet.
It was great.
Awesome. So, number 8. We say we want to fulfill our desires, but what we really want is the outcomes of those desires. What the most tangible way it came up in the conversation was something that Carol Luck said. She said, people don't want money. They want the things that money give them. They want freedom. They want safety. They want opportunity. They want experience. They want to care for others. So as you hear something like that, what strikes you, or how do you think about that particular idea?
Well, I think that's the beauty of EFT and letting the tapping do some work to get underneath that to, with apologies for Stephen Colbert, a truthier place about why I want that thing. And since EFT is famous for not directly asking the question why, we are tapping to get to the point where we find out what the desire is, let's call it, all about. And I think the first time that I really saw that so clearly was in weight loss. You know, I want to lose all this poundage, and they would say, why? And well, because it's healthier. My children want me to. I mean, it would go on and on and on. And I actually developed what I call the blurt game as a way to chop away, gently, but chopping away at getting down to the real nitty-gritty reason that I wanted that. And often we'll come to a place, I don't really work in weight loss a lot by choice, but in the past, it would come to the place of, so I would finally feel good about me when people looked at me. And so that's the kind of illustration of how getting underneath it helps us get what we really want.
Yeah, I like that, asking the question, great, so what will that give you? Great, so what will that give you? Great, what will that give you? Great, what will that get you? Like, you know, there's the old 7 why process, you know, why? And you just ask that question 7 times, like each time they give an answer, and do it in a way that's not, like, I'm not saying, justify your answer to me. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Why is that useful? Like, why do you want that? You know, not that I'm saying it's wrong, but cool. So you want that thing, why? What does that give you? You know? How is your life different at 3:30 on a Tuesday afternoon if you have this particular thing? And oftentimes what that does is, like, weight is a perfect example, is sometimes the shape of our physical body is correlated with our health. And sometimes the shape of our physical body is not correlated with our health. And if the goal is not to lose weight, but to be healthier, awesome. That gives us the opportunity to investigate this in lots of different ways. When I know why I want something, a way that I never thought of that could give me that particular thing shows up, and I can now seize it because, like, oh, great, this is a path to get me the exact same outcome, even if the plan that I had was not the right plan to get me there.
I agree. And I think that illustrates the co-pilot idea of, you know, you're helping them get to where they really want to go because you're helping them find out where it is they really wanted to go, not just the surface.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my clients a couple of days ago, and we were working on she was talking about how she works with seniors after retirement, helping them find purpose, because oftentimes they now have all of this extra time they didn't have before, and they're just trying to figure out what to do with their life, especially if they're in a circumstance where financially they can make some choices that they want. And she said, I was in this group of seniors and I asked them, what's your ideal? And someone came back and said, what do you mean? What's ideal?
Mhm.
Like they were so good at naming the thing that they didn't want, that they didn't have a vision of what they wanted instead. And sometimes, like you said, as that co-pilot, we're helping someone to frame what is possible because they're in so much distress or pain or disorientation that they don't have the capacity, they don't have the resource state to name what is possible. Like it is so far away that being able, so it's one of the reasons I don't use a SUD scale very often, but when I do, I like using a SU scale instead, the subjective unit of distress, going from, it's not just reducing the pain. What do I want instead? What is the thing that I can put in that? Like, what's the alternative? Like, it's great. Like, if you have chronic pain, being pain free is an amazing blessing. But what's the next better thing after that? Maybe it's flexibility. Maybe it's energy. Maybe it's flow. Maybe it's comfort.
I do love that. The Sue scale is awesome. When Sylvia put that out, mind blowing, because we had not codified
Yeah.
imagining better until
Yeah.
she came up with that. And it does have its built-in place for things to go.
Hmm.
And how can you keep going? And this is where I think I get that favorite hashtag that I use, which is hashtag better than this
Yeah.
and better than this and better
Yep.
than, because if we tell people, that's not the right word. If we encourage people to envision and the next,
Hmm.
they have their own path starting to unfold in front of them. And they are not so clueless. They are not so, okay, well, I'm here, but why am I not happy now?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Excellent. Number 9, our first and primary work is loving ourselves more.
Mm.
My 2000 and 2020, my work was just be gentle with yourself. Like that was my goal. Like irregardless of what was going on in the world, like that was my goal. Just be gentler with yourself. Like that, my daily. Okay, how do you be gentler with yourself today?
I, I love this. I think this dovetails really nicely into the whole concept around not just loving, but forgiving.
Mm,
Forgiving, in my book, is so misunderstood in our culture. And I don't mean that I understand it and they don't. I don't mean
right,
it
right.
like that. I mean self-delusional, um, just really common. And so I say, well, the most important forgiveness work is always about forgiving ourselves. Right? It's really not so much about forgiving the other.
Yeah,
It has so much more richness and depth about forgiving ourselves, which in my book is a way to finally love ourselves.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. And that, for me, when I think of that sense of forgiveness, forgiveness means that I am no longer emotionally stuck in the past. I can forgiving is not forgetting. I can forgive and remember. I can forgive and take the lesson. I can forgive and take responsibility. I can forgive and not say someone else is going to do this to me again. Forgiveness is meaning that I'm putting the past in the past where it belongs, and I can regret the choices that I made and take responsibility for them, but not have to be relitigating them every moment of the day emotionally.
It's a get out of jail free card. It really
Yeah.
is.
And number 10, when in doubt, tap without words.
Always,
Yeah.
always. I think that it belongs in tapping. It belongs in conceptually around emotional first aid. The whole idea is taking the simple truth, and that's why I say all the time, tapping simple would just take the simple truth as you know it right this
Mhm.
moment. And often the simple truth right this moment is, I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
yet. Not yet. I don't know. The truth is, I really don't. Not yet.
And the other thing that this does, and this is something that when Gwyneth Moss and I were having this conversation, she shared the idea that when she teaches people to tap, the first time she teaches them to tap, she doesn't teach them words.
That's right.
Because we then liberate someone when they're tapping on their own from having to know what to say and think. Because like even if I have a client who's fully formed and understands that the words aren't magic, and they're fully formed and they know that there's no perfect words. They still get hung up on what are the things to say. And just like it's so funny, like the way a baby sucks its thumb, my right hand just goes to my collarbone. Like it is like I've just trained myself that, like, for whatever reason, for me, that is my self-soothing spot. I don't know why that is, but for me, that's just the place I go. And whenever, like, anything, it's just like like, okay, I'm just doing that thing, and it almost looks like a little bit of a nervous twitch, but it's not. And it's just going, okay, this is just making it a little bit easier for me to navigate what is going on in front of me.
I love that. And most people know that CJ taught me first, and then Gwyneth taught me second, third, and fourth, and fifth.
Yeah.
And so I did learn, and it seems really simplistic because EFT seems like such a small, tiny little algorithm. But the truth is, when people are learning, it's just a pedagogical truth that stair-stepped a little bit at a time, accretive learning, just building one on top of another,
Yeah.
is much more effective and easier for someone to grasp. So if I'm showing you what tapping feels like, and then I'm showing you some places to tap, and then I'm showing you how to string them together,
Yeah.
each one of those becomes just laid down smoothly. And by the time we have that together and we put on the words, it's so much easier for them to do that because they're not attending to more than one thing at a time. So she taught me that, and that's gospel right there. We learn to tap before we learn to tap and talk.
And sometimes we don't have to talk. like,
Yes.
so in the last 6 months or so, every morning, most mornings, I just set 10 minutes on my watch and I just sit here and tap without words. And it's literally, it's my daily practice as I start the day, and ideas come up and I jot down ideas and to-dos, and I get clear, and, like, it's amazing, like, the stuff that comes through inside of that. But it's not that I'm doing that because I don't know what to say. I'm doing it that way because it's actually super effective. It's not like this is riding a bike with training wheels. This is riding a bike and it's really, really awesome and it does what it's supposed to. And sometimes we can zhuzh it up with these other things, but they're not necessary. So this isn't a dumbing down version of what we're doing. This is the thing that we're doing.
And it's the proof in the pudding that you're just talking about, that we let the tapping do the work it will.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Awesome. So for those of you who are following along, if these ideas are things that have perked your interest and you'd like to go a lot deeper with these and see a lot of really tangible ways to apply this stuff, again, I'd encourage you to check it out. Just go to tappingsuccessacademy.com/Jondi to be able to participate in this really amazing program. If you have any questions about it specifically, you can drop me a note directly, Gene, Gene, at tappingqa.com. Jondi, thank you for spending a little bit of a Saturday morning with me. I love having conversations with you, because we are people that are on parallel paths but see the world very differently. And so oftentimes when you're sharing stuff, it takes the stuff that I've experienced and it gives me new vocabulary and deeper understanding because of your disposition for it. And so I am always nurtured by these conversations. So thanks for spending some time with me.
Well, thank you. I feel the same way about you, brother. I do.